Okay, so we're going to see how this goes because not only do I actually live in a kind of busier area, definitely actually a busier area than I did when I was filming in front of my parents' house when I started making videos 10 years ago, which is actually crazy. But I also didn't have my dogs back then, and I've tried to let them know that it's me out here, not a stranger, so they don't bark the whole time. But we'll see. This is all kind of an experiment. We'll see how the sound goes. And it's all an experiment, too, in the fact that you probably already noticed by the title, but I am back with a tea talk. So if you've been on my channel for a while, you know, not only, I keep saying if you've been on my channel for a while, but I've been doing this for 10 years. So there's a lot of things that have changed, transformed, gone away and come back. And, you know, in recent years, I have been doing a lot more visual, I don't know if you want to call it cinematic stuff, but talking is one of my favorite pastimes. Having this conversation, this community. I love listening to lots of conversations. I'm a big, I don't even know what you would call it, podcast, sermon, talks, lecture, books on tape. I guess you'd call it audible, not books on tape. That shows my age. But kind of person. So I am wanting to experiment with something. We'll see how this goes. Maybe I'll quit it in a week. But I want to bring Tea Talk back to my channel, but I want to bring it back a little bit differently. I want to bring it back where it's basically my thing, me talking. And then if and when I can bring people on, I want to do that as well. It's a little bit harder right now, not only because of everything going on in the world, but also being a mom. And I just think that, you know, it might be easier if I just film these on my own. You didn't need all of that. This was already an excessively long intro, but that's kind of what's going on. So I have my tea. This is my second or third tea of the day. I don't know. And it's only 11 something. My life is a lot earlier. It starts a lot earlier in the day now that I have a baby, which everybody told me would happen. He's pretty much up every day at 6 a.m. Although today he was in bed till 7:30 a.m. So that was pretty exciting. That's probably why I feel all fluffy and bright and ready to film. So today for Tea Talk, I have had this subject on my mind for a while now, and I thought it would be a good topic for me to talk about. And then when my friend Lynette came to town to visit, which ironically Lynette is also a YouTuber as well, and double ironically, Lynette has actually done a tea talk with me years ago. I want to say 2-3 years ago, right after we moved to Nashville. I went to Michigan to get my brows microbladed, and I filmed with Lynette because I love Lynette. I think she's one of those people that just has lots of gems of wisdom. Although on that note, I actually feel most people have gems of wisdom. If you've been on my channel for a while, I keep repeating that, you know that one of my favorite sayings is eat the fish and spit out the bones. And that is kind of self-explanatory. This is kind of a side tangent, but I think that so many people have, or everyone really has, bits of wisdom and things that you can garner from their life story and all of that. But Lynette is an awesome, super wise, sweet person that's always striving to learn and grow. I didn't expect that to be a full-blown Lynette appreciation shout out, but there you go. Anyways, when Lynette came to town, she asked me this question, and I was like, whoa, that's so weird because I've been thinking of making this video. I guess it's not that weird because a lot of you guys have asked me, and I think it's actually kind of an obvious next video to cover if you have been watching my videos the last few years, because you've seen there was an evolution, something went down, and clearly a lot of people didn't feel we kind of filled in the gaps as to how we got from A to Z, I guess you would say. So just like the title says, the question that I'm going to be answering and the thing that I'm going to be talking about today is why Dan and I changed our minds about having a kid, about having a biological baby. So let me back up. I think the most overused saying in this video is going to be, if you've been watching my videos for a while, but if you've been watching my videos for a while, you know that back in the day, well, okay, first off, let me back up here. Dan and I have been married now for 12 years. We've been together for about 14 years, and we just had our first child, our son, Logan, who is 5 months old now. And when Dan and I were first dating, you know, Dan, I remember him telling me that he wanted to be a young dad. It actually might have been on the very first like night we hung out, like making a reference or something like that. And then he brought it up again as we were dating. And I remember once we had started dating and he brought that up, I said to him, I was like, oh, well, like if you're trying to be a young dad, you're dating the wrong person, because I don't want to have kids for a while. And Dan, you know, like flexed or was flexible towards what I wanted. And obviously we didn't have kids all of these years. And it's been really interesting, just the journey that I feel like I've gone through in my brain to end up now with our biological son, Logan. So over the years, as time went on and we kept waiting, when Dan and I first started dating, my parents actually adopted my brother, Casey, from China. And their adoption process was literally like 7 years or something crazy like that. Like it was a very long process full of kind of a lot of drama until the end, when everything came together so seamlessly and perfectly. But the whole process leading up was like kind of an ordeal. But all that to be said, saying that it came together seamlessly and perfectly, I and Dan, because literally like the day after Dan and I got engaged is when my parents got on the flight to China to go pick up my brother and bring him home. And so Dan and I experienced the integration of my brother into our family from the very beginning, and it was so beautiful. My brother is not only just like the most beautiful soul. I literally always am like, I just got chills. Who are you? Like he's an amazing person, and I feel really blessed, as do the rest of my family members, to have him in our family. And so Dan and I both became really jaded, except if there was like an opposite word of jaded, like positively jaded, like, wow, adoption, like this is the best. Throw that into the mix of the fact that when I was in high school, I was actually in a Bible study group where we were going through the book of James, which to those of you that are not Christians, that are not believers, James is a book in the Bible, and James was actually Jesus's brother. And that's a whole thing I'm not going to go off on right now. James didn't, as far as we know, he actually didn't believe that Jesus was who he said he was when Jesus was alive. So it's this whole thing. Anyways, he wrote a book in the Bible and it was named after him, James. And it kind of became like my favorite book. And when we hit James 1:27 in this Bible study, something about that verse, which I'll quote it for you. It says, the only religion that God our Father finds pure and faultless is to take care of orphans and widows in their distress and to keep oneself from being polluted by the world. And when I hit that verse, something about it, it was like, you know, people are like, here's my life verse. I had never had a life verse. Nothing had ever like hit me like that. Car. There we go. But that verse really hit me. So there were a lot of things going on. Me, you know, wanting to wait, my brother being adopted, that verse really like burying into my soul. I actually have it tattooed on my wrist. And side note, not that anybody really needs to know this, but even though we did not end up adopting, which is jumping way ahead, and I'm still going to fill in all these gaps, that verse is still so important to me. Not only because we still may adopt one day, but that's kind of a separate thing, but not really. But B, Dan's and my passion, I guess you could say, like the cause that we have decided to kind of like focus on, I guess you could say, in our life monetarily and maybe time at one point, is to fight human trafficking, slavery. There's actually supposedly more slaves alive today than any other point in history ever, which is crazy. So anyways, came to that verse. That was a part of a thing. Another thing that played into this, as you guys know, I deal with a lot of chronic pain. I started suffering from like these random injuries when I was like 12, and that's pretty much the last time I remember like feeling really good physically, was around 12 when things started kicking in. And literally since then, when I started having problems, it was kind of like a domino effect. One thing affected the next thing, affected the next thing, affected the next thing. I never have fully really healed from any injuries that I've ever had. So everything kind of compiled, or if that's the word, over the years. Is there another car coming? Car. Wayne's World. No, I think that was just a loud truck driving down the street. So yeah, I've actually never really fully healed from an injury. I have a lot of like half healings, you know, like my hip. I had a hip surgery when I was 16. It's not like fresh out of surgery, not even at all. Car. Yeah, my hip is doing great. I'm walking, all of that. But like my hip is still messed up. Like it's still not great. So all of these things came together and made me and then Dan want to adopt. We were also, and this is kind of the biggest, we're getting into the biggest part of this equation. When Dan and I started the adoption process, we were under a very different impression of what adoption really was at this point in, you know, the year 2019, 2020. Well, really it was 2019 because that's when we ended up ending it. And we like literally thought there were just like all of these babies around that like needed someone to take them home. And part of that sounds very naive. I just want to throw that out there. Like, why do you think there's all these babies? Part of the reason we had come to that conclusion is because we actually have friends that work within the foster care system, that do, that are involved in international adoption agencies. And particularly here in the US, we were told that because of the unfortunate opioid crisis that has really taken or has a stranglehold here in the States, that there were all these people that were having babies. And that's kind of, dude, that's a separate thing. We're not going to go down where my brain was about to go, but that there were all these people that were having babies that were not equipped to take care of their babies. And so they basically needed homes. Or the parents had passed away from opiates or opioids. And so that was where our head was at. When we got farther into the process, it became very evident as time unfolded that at least out here, and I know I've seen the comments, I've seen the messages, it varies from state to state, county to county. If you're looking internationally, you know, country to country, everything is very different everywhere you go. But overall, the conclusion that we came to and what seemed to become very evident was that the need that existed in the world was not the need that we thought existed. So we thought, okay, well, if there's all these babies that need homes, like, I don't care that much about duplicating my DNA. Like, I'll take a baby in. We'll take a baby in, and love them as our own. And having that experience with my brother, you know, only solidified that for us. It wasn't hard for us to imagine how you could love a child that wasn't biologically yours. So we're like, yeah, let's do that. But the farther we got in, the more we realized, oh, the real need that exists, or the one that was presenting itself to us, was older children. There were a lot of older children within the foster care system. Also in different countries around the world where they had their adoption programs. A lot of the kids that really, like, the need really existed within older children, as well as kids with special needs. And neither of those things were what we had envisioned or what we had wanted when we embarked on the adoption journey. Now, like I said, that's a separate thing. Dan and I have talked. We still may adopt one day. We actually may open up our home to older children one day. Now, all of that being said, we kind of need to back up here. There's been a lot of drama recently within the adoption community, specifically international adoption, and a lot of people asking me to speak on what has happened with Micah Stauffer and her family. And I haven't wanted to say anything for a lot of reasons. First off, guys, I've been on YouTube for 10 years. I literally know, like, everyone. That's not true. But I know so many people. And I really don't ever speak up on drama. Dan is literally pulling away in his truck right now with, like, stuff that we're cleaning out of Logan's room. Yay, making progress on his room. Yeah, you've never seen his nursery because he doesn't have one right now. Anyways, so I know a lot of people personally, and I've never spoken up on drama. It's never felt right. A lot of these people are actual friends of mine, or they're friends, which is what I would say about Micah. We went out to lunch once about 2 years ago because she was visiting Nashville with her friends, and she knew that I was adopting, and she asked if, you know, we wanted to meet up and talk about it, and we did. And yeah, I mean, it was what it was. We just talked a little bit about adoption. But the thing is, Wow, are birds going crazy right now? There's a lot of bird noises happening. Okay, so yeah, like I said, I know a lot of people. I've never spoken up about drama, but also it's kind of like, what does everyone want me to say? Like, I don't know the intimate details of their life or exactly what happened. And if there's one thing I've learned, and I know, and I kind of agree that everyone is really angry at the Stoffers, and I get it. So I don't want you to think I don't by saying this. But if there's one thing I've learned about being on the internet or being in the public eye and having people, watch you and have their opinions, is that, and this is true, guys, this is true if you're off the internet, but it's very true on the internet, that people will like make things up and fill in the blanks. I don't even really know why, because maybe like we all just like want answers, or I don't know, but I don't trust a lot of stuff that shows up online. Even when people try to piece together things from people's own content, I know not only what goes into creating content, but I know how much is not on the internet. So I'm not defending Micah per se, but I'm just saying there's like a lot of reasons that I haven't really wanted to say anything, because I literally am like, what do you guys want me to say? Like, just to get like mad at her publicly. Like I said, there's been so much drama with like all of my YouTube friends over the years. And not only does it not feel right to speak up about it, but to be honest, I haven't ever wanted to. And I think it's like important to stay true to yourself and stay in your lane. And like, if you're not the kind of person that loves like publicly talking about, like gossip and other people's stuff, even if it's an important issue, it's like, why are you going to force that? So yeah, so all of that being said, I think the reason I brought that up was to bring it back to the beginning for international adoption and the things that we found out as we went. We got a lot of comments from people when we were going through the process. Like, a lot of people were really mad at us, and a lot of people really thought that we were not taking the process seriously, or, which I mean, story of my life, right? They thought we were like low-key stupid and like just not aware or had any idea of what was going on, which, in some ways is true, because I actually think that's kind of true about everyone venturing into something, no matter how much research you've done. Like, research is different than lived experience, in my opinion. But I think research is very important. I'm all about it. I love listening to things and looking at other, learning from other people's perspectives and life experiences. But a lived experience is different. But a lot of people thought that as we were going through the process, and they thought that when we would change things, because it was like, we're adopting internationally from this country, and then it was like, oh, well, now we're in that country, and then it was like, oh, we got kicked out of that country, oh, now we're in this country, and then it was like, we're gonna do domestic, private, and then we were doing that, and then we're like, oh, just kidding, we're gonna do foster care. It was because we found stuff out as we went, and we were honest with ourselves, and we were seeking a lot of counsel. So that's the thing. Not only do we have a lot of friends in real life that have either adopted, worked at an adoption agency, worked with foster care, had foster kids, but on top of that, we were meeting with people that we consider mentors, people from our church, my therapist. At one point, we were presented with a child's profile who, was older, and we spent like the entire weekend, which sounds like I'm making it more dramatic. It's like not that dramatic, but it kind of is. It was literally the entire weekend doing research on the phone with family and friends, talking to my counselor who has experience in the adoption foster care space. So we were taking each step very seriously, and I think that's why we seemed a little flippant on the internet, because we couldn't and didn't want to give every detail of everything. I wanted to kind of document more of a broad overview and encourage people. I still wanted to give details because I felt like there was a lot missing from the internet, but we literally couldn't give everything. And I still right now can't give everything, other than saying that every step that we were researching and finding and hitting a wall and then walked away from, it was for a reason. There is a lot of, how do I word this? Adopting now, especially like, let's look at China. Very different than when my parents adopted from China. The country has changed in and of itself. They had rules before, only one child per family, basically. So the country has changed in that aspect, but also even I think the country's view on adoption, and that has been happening all around the globe, which is amazing. Simultaneously, as we were falling down, this wormhole of adoption, and I was continuing all of my research the whole time, I also found out there's a lot of shady stuff that goes on in international adoption. One might almost say human trafficking. And obviously, I made that mention in the beginning, we want to move forward in continuing to help fight human trafficking. And when I started seeing remnants of this all over the internet, and I started hearing certain stories and reading certain things, it got clearer and clearer, like, wow, we might be over our heads, and there might be something going on here that's like not right. Now, that is not a slam to our adoption agency. I truly believe that the adoption agency we were working with is a fair, honest agency that really strives to do the right thing. And I actually think that's why we got kicked out of one of the countries that we were looking at, because they're so by the rules and trying to do things right that I think they foresaw issues that we didn't actually see. So international was off the table. We ended up looking private here in the US through like a private agency. We had a couple of meetings, and that ended up not feeling right either, because we started to realize, oh, this is also not a situation where there's like a plethora of kids that just like need you to adopt them. It was more of a situation, it seemed, with the agency we were talking to, that a lot of the people waiting to hopefully adopt, hoping they could adopt, were people that struggled with fertility, that just wanted to build their family. And it felt so weird to like take that from people and pitch ourselves to, moms, like, pick us, when it's like there might be another perfectly great family right here who are just so desperate to build their family and couldn't do it biologically. And that was something that a lot of you guys had said to us in the comments early on in our adoption, like, oh, you're taking from families. And I really thought, like, you don't get it. There's so many people that need homes. We're not taking from someone. But the farther I got into it, that is actually kind of what it started to feel like, was like, oh wow, you're lucky if you get picked because, like, by the parents, because there's more people trying to get a baby than there are babies. At least that was the experience that we encountered. And so there was that. So then we put a pause on that, on top of the fact that it was, side note, insanely expensive to adopt privately, at least the agencies that we were speaking to. We were like, whoa, that's a lot of money. So that also felt weird for a lot of different reasons. Anyways, then we looked at foster care. We went through the full foster care ordeal, took all of the classes, the safety classes, the training, and through this whole process we went through so much, right? 2 psychological evaluations, blood tests, family and friends had to write us letters, criminal background runs or whatever, all of these kinds of things through the process. And so we ended up going through the whole process for foster care. I don't know if I ever told the internet this, but when we first got into that process, there's a gardening truck going by. It was very much, and I don't say this lightly, it was very much painted to us that there actually were a lot of babies that unfortunately were not with their parents anymore because their parents couldn't care for them because of struggling with drug addiction. And so that was very much what was told to us, kind of pitched to us. Okay, so I low-key don't fully remember where I left off because my baby started crying, and so I had to go in and take care of him. I think I was talking about foster care and the fact that when we started the foster care process, we were told that there was this specific need that existed, and then by the end we were basically told that that wasn't true, even though we had kind of touched base through the process, and we were basically reassured that that was true. So it was kind of a switch, and that didn't sit super well with us either, not only just because that didn't sit well to have something swapped out kind of at the last minute, and have the scenario and the story change that was being told to us, but also because that wasn't what we were prepared for. That's not what we went into the process feeling willing and prepared to take on. And that's kind of the thing, side note, with a lot of this drama going on right now, with adoption in general on the internet, is like, that's why we didn't move forward with everything, because we were taking it seriously. That is not to be misconstrued as like Micah and the Stoffers weren't taking it seriously, but I'm saying that the things like that they had encountered were things that we were seeing. And actually, okay, so I had to come inside because it started to get loud out there. So the neighbors had some people over. I was like, all right, this doesn't work. You can definitely hear their whole conversation. So anyways, back to what I was saying. Yeah, you know, there were definitely things. Yes, my conversation with her, but our conversations, like I said, with counselors, pastors, family members, friends that had adopted, friends that had done foster care, that really helped to fill out the picture of like what we could be walking into. And you never know what you're walking into in any situation in life, right? But it really made us like, we took it seriously, coming face to face with like, okay, can we handle this? / what do we really feel equipped to do at this point in our life? And it became apparent after that, you know, I think it was like 14 months of going down that path, that we did not feel the desire or feel equipped at this point to fulfill the need that we saw existed, and then all of those other, you know, elements in the mix as well. Okay, so now is where we get to kind of like the other side of the story, which, you know, it's not really the other side, it's all part of the same thing, but there is another kind of thing that goes into really what made me want to try to have a biological child. Because like I mentioned before, you know, I did have a lot of physical pain, and I had honestly thought like maybe I just wasn't ever going to have a biological child. I had kind of been toying with that idea for a few years and having that conversation with friends and family. And I mean, I think you guys even knew that was kind of where my head was at. And it was in that place, like I said, because of all of our just like misconceptions about the need that actually exists in the world and what we were feeling willing and ready and equipped to step into. So once that kind of final, I say final because this is when we changed gears, answer came from the foster care agency, when they basically called and were like, just kidding, we don't have young babies for you to foster, like we've kind of said the whole time, but that's a separate thing, but not a separate thing. That is when I made the flip. I was like, I don't think we should go down this path anymore. I think I want to try to have a biological child. But even though that's when the flip happened, there was a lead up during that process. So during that previous 14 months, not only had we been going through the foster and adoption journey and kind of switching gears multiple times and making our way down that path, but simultaneously, I had been watching a lot of, I guess you could say, like philosophical content. So fun fact, those of you who don't know this, and like I said in the beginning, if you've been watching my videos for a long time, you already do know this, that philosophy, history, sociology, all of that has been a passion of mine, really since I was a kid. Like I remember being the weird fourth grader that like stayed up all night to like watch the presidential election or whatever. Like I've always been very into like public things that are happening, and I guess that kind of really has nothing to do with sociology, but kind of. And I've just always been interested in weird things. Not saying that's weird, but still. And really since we moved to Nashville, I had spent a lot of time listening to lectures and audiobooks and different YouTubers' channels. And that is, you know, I've always been that way, but I would say the previous like 2 years before moving from LA to Nashville, I had kind of like shut down that side of me because I was so busy doing stuff that I honestly didn't really have time to like feed my brain in that way and really like give into my interests. I was busy just like creating and building stuff. And to those of you that don't know what I'm talking about, I was doing a lot of work here on the internet, kind of almost in like a production company capacity, prior to leaving LA. And for a lot of reasons, it became evident that wasn't what we wanted to do anymore. I felt like we were being called by God to Nashville, which was so random. So when we got here, my life slowed down drastically. And prior to starting the adoption process, we had already been in Nashville for about a year, I think. And so I had already had the time to pursue these intellectual interests again for that previous year. And then when we started the process, I was still going down that path. And a lot of the videos and talks and things that I listen to and watch, which I feel like a lot of you are going to ask, and I can't really answer that for two reasons. A, the list is way too long. Like, I was going to say nuanced, but that's not the right word. It's way too long. I wouldn't even fully know how to backtrack the thousands of hours of stuff that I've watched and listened to. But also some of it's really controversial, and a lot of people still don't understand this about me, which I don't blame you. I think even my own family gets confused sometimes. That like, I really like listening to a lot of different perspectives of something. That was like people around a circle, if you missed that. And so sometimes like telling people the things that I like to listen to or that I've heard, it's like that automatically means you're backing everything that someone says, which is like so kind of a low-key pet peeve of mine. I'm like, dude, I can eat the fish, spit out the bones. Anyways, so if you were gonna ask, don't ask, because I won't be able to like list everything. But I had listened to a lot of stuff over the previous 2 years talking about the concept of, if you want to call it traditionalism, we can call it that, but really just the concept of running a home and running a family and having a child biologically, and also the concept of living kind of in a modern society, especially here in the States, that doesn't necessarily, depending on your perspective, doesn't necessarily value families and the building of families and traditional nuclear family units in particular. And I started to kind of piece together a different worldview that kind of led me to believe that society in general, at least this was my perspective, my experience living in the States, being me, I started to feel like society, culture, the arts in general, for some reason, doesn't really value life, doesn't really want us to procreate. And I started to think that was kind of weird as I really like thought about it over those 2 years. I was like, wait a minute. Okay, it literally says in the Bible to be fruitful and multiply. Also, on a side note, one of the things I had mentioned before in one of my adoption videos was like, hey, if there's all this overpopulation on the planet, like that's the other thing, like why have a baby? My opinions on that also changed and developed as I learned more about certain theories of population, like ebb and flows, and the way that they've seen population like go up and down in different countries as they develop and become more advanced and blah, blah, blah. So even my opinion on that kind of changed, and I started to feel like it was almost like, I don't want to say nefarious, but if we want to say that, like there was something like trying to push me or tell me, or me being like society, not just like me, Nikki, that we shouldn't have babies. And it kind of aligned with a lot of my other things, beliefs, thoughts, things that I had noticed. And, you know, I started to just change my mind and feel like, wait, what if this really is like way more life-changing and cooler than I've realized, or than I've given weight like to this. And between all of the frustrations, like do you see why it's hard for me to explain? There's a lot here between realizing like there are people that literally can't have babies, they're not fertile, and I'm jumping in front of them. Realizing my views shifting on international adoption, feeling a little bit tricked, if you want to use that word, when we were, you know, approaching things in the foster care system, and then feeling like we weren't really equipped. And on top of all of that, feeling like, hey, I never said I didn't want to have a biological baby. I was just on the fence. And there was also part of me that started to feel like, am I going to spend years trying to adopt or trying to foster, maybe not even having it happen? I mean, it took my parents 7 years. And then that, like, I'm basically waving goodbye to my fertility, which not really. I'm only 33 right now. I realize some women get pregnant all the way up into their 40s, but I just kind of was projecting into the future and thinking like, but what if this takes forever and it never happens? Like, am I that confident to say goodbye to reproduction. And I realized that I wasn't, even with all of my injuries and my body aches and pains. I remember one day with my therapist, I was like crying to her, and I'm like, I don't think I can do this. Everybody keeps telling me, oh, you'll get pregnant and like your injuries might get better. And I was like, I know that's not true. I know it. And I remember her telling me, but you don't know it. She was like, you think it, but you don't actually know it yet. And fast forward, side note, I mean, she's right. I do have not even, honestly, everything's still kind of the same. I was going to say I have some new issues, but not even really. I mean, other than my stomach being looser, but that's not like an ache and a pain. And even the loosening of my core, I don't feel like has caused new aches and pains. I feel like everything's still just like kind of the same. It didn't like drastically go off a cliff once I had a baby. And so yeah, but I remember feeling that way, and my therapist really being like, you don't know. You are playing God and pretending like you know based off of like, you know, good information or like your past, but you really don't know. And so all of these things kind of collided together, and we just decided to go for it. Like it really was like all of a sudden I just felt like we had to do it, or like I wanted to try. And you guys know the rest of the story. We basically got pregnant month 1, which was crazy because I've not been on birth control this whole time. We weren't really using like super on it protection. We just did what we thought we needed to do to like not get pregnant. And it was really crazy to see how fast we were able to get pregnant. That made me feel really blessed on a side note, because I know that so many people struggle with fertility. And you guys know we've talked about this before, that it just, man, God's timing and what he has for your life, like it became very evident once I got pregnant right away, and just seeing all of this play out. And, you know, I've said this so many times on my Instagram now, I feel like I keep screaming it from the tops, because the way that I feel, you may not feel this way, but this is why I keep saying it. I really feel like there is a de-emphasis, if that's the wording, on having not only a child, but growing a family. And, you know, that, like I said, that's how I feel. You might be like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm single and I feel like everybody's pushing me to have a baby. Right? Everybody's experience is different. But from where my viewpoint was and what I was looking out into the world and seeing was that there wasn't really a value on having babies and growing a family. And I really, even when we did it, it was legitimately from the perspective of like, okay, well, I know I want a family like someday. Like, I don't want to be someone that grows up to be, even though I'm already an adult, someone who doesn't have kids. Like, unless that's what God has for me, that's not something that I wanted to choose to walk into. So I guess we should have a baby. That was really my mindset. And then once I had a baby, because that was my mindset, and because, like I said, I feel like everything about having a baby was de-emphasized and pushed as like a big pain in the butt and like just no fun and exhausting and all of the bad things, right? I have been so just like floored with the amount of joy that having a baby has brought into my life. And that's what I keep feeling like I want to scream from the rooftops, because there's got to be other people like me that just literally had no idea. Like, I had no idea that, okay, yes, maybe those things are true sometimes, that you're tired and that it's hard, but also, it's the most beautiful thing I've ever done. And he has brought so much joy into our lives. We spend a lot of time laughing with him. I literally didn't know. I feel kind of, not dumb, but kind of dumb, that like I didn't know that a baby could bring that much joy into your life. And I remember my mom said to me, she's like, that makes me sad. I feel like that's like my fault. Like, I didn't convey that to you. And, you know, sure, your own family, you know, unit can kind of give you a perspective on the world or on families, but I don't think it was like just my family. I think that there is that kind of message going out in culture and in media and in television that is opposite having a family, that doesn't want you to have a family or want you to have babies. And that's like a whole other thing I'm not even going to go down, and I'm not trying to get in trouble on this video. I do believe that that opposition exists, especially because I am a Christian and a believer in, I don't know how you want to word this, like the biblical narrative. I think there's opposition to that, and I think it's really sad. And like I said, I want to scream from the rooftops to any of you that had the same experience as me or worldview as me in regards to having babies and growing a family for yourself. I just want you to know what my experience has been, because I think through sharing stories, we can all learn from each other. And I was so scared to have a baby. I was so scared of pregnancy. I was so scared of birth. I was so scared of having an actual baby. And I can't believe that he's even here, and I can't believe how much joy he's brought into our life. So that was a super long story, and at the end of these videos, I feel like I'm always going to be paranoid. Like, did any of that amount to anything? Was that interesting? Was that helpful? I don't know, but I'm hoping, there's my baby right now. I'm hoping I was able, he's with Dan, don't worry. I'm not just like, oh, there he is in the distance crying. I hope that this was able to kind of like fill in some of the gaps and answer some questions for you. Like I said, I could honestly go on for like 3 more hours, and believe it or not, this was actually the vague overview with all of my thoughts and feelings and opinions. But I'm always kind of wondering, like, how much do I say? How much do I not say? Words can also be very misunderstood on the internet, and sometimes it feels like the more words you give, the more trouble you can get into, even when you're just trying to clarify something. So I get a little bit like unsure, but that's it. So I have a few things on my list, but if you have any specific requests or questions, please leave them down below, and I will take those into consideration for future Tea Talk episodes. And I'm really gonna try to do this. We'll see if it like works, like if I actually can do it. But I feel like if I can kind of alternate between my day in my life videos and then Tea Talks, that sounds like a good mix that I might like. I feel like I might be down for that. Also, if you're still listening to me, check the info box, because I'll still be doing giveaways in these videos, because I still receive so many products from companies and I can't use all of them. I give a lot away to friends, family, my church, and then I do these giveaways as well. So good luck to that giveaway. I will hopefully see you guys back here very soon with another new video, and that's all. All right, bye guys.